I wasn't always the man people now call a genius. I didn't walk into boardrooms with power in my stride or sit at the helm of billion-dollar ventures. Once, not too long ago, I was just a kid from Brooklyn. Sharp, sure, but constantly overlooked. People see the polished suit now. They see the confidence, the calculated precision in every move. What they don't see is where it all began. I still remember the smell of burned coffee and overcooked eggs from the diner my mother used to work at. She raised me alone. My father walked out when I was 7, and the only legacy he left behind was a pile of debt and a broken promise. We lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. Rent was late more often than not. I used to fall asleep to the hum of washing machines, dreaming of skyscrapers and shiny shoes, of a life where people listened when I spoke. Books became my first escape. While other kids were out playing ball, I was reading everything I could. Finance, technology, psychology. I didn't just want money. I wanted to understand how it all worked. Why some people stayed poor forever, while others seemed to build empires out of nothing. But knowledge doesn't pay bills. So at 16, I took up 2 part-time jobs. One was delivering pizza, the other, cleaning offices downtown after hours. That's where I first saw it, wealth. Not the flashy kind, the quiet, calculated kind. Men and women working late in glass towers, talking in a language I didn't yet understand. They weren't just rich. They were strategic. Every word, every move, a chess piece on some invisible board. I watched. I learned. I listened. Fast forward to my college years. I didn't go to an Ivy League school. Couldn't afford it. But I got into City College on a partial scholarship, and that was all the leverage I needed. I spent more time in the library than in lectures. I taught myself coding at night, built my first app in a basement with a borrowed laptop and 3 friends who believed in the dream. We called it Sphere, a social platform designed for freelancers to connect, collaborate, and cash out in real time. No investors. No fancy offices. Just grit and endless nights. It failed, miserably. We lost what little money we had, and the friends, they bailed. Only one stayed, Marcus. He told me, "Brandon, you're too damn stubborn to quit. That's your superpower." I didn't feel like a superhero. I felt like a joke. For 2 years after that, I floated through life, took consulting gigs, built other people's dreams, watched them profit off my brain. I started dressing sharp, talking sharp. If I couldn't win yet, I'd at least look like I had. And then came that day. It was a Monday afternoon. I had just closed a small automation contract for a finance firm in Midtown. Nothing life-changing, but enough to keep the lights on. I walked into that fancy restaurant, the Rosette, just to treat myself. It was one of those places where the waiters wear gloves and water is poured like it's a performance. She walked up to me with a menu in hand. Her name tag read, Alina. She wasn't like the others, no forced smile, no rehearsed tone. Her eyes were sharp, observant, like she saw through everything. I looked at the menu, pretending to care. But honestly, I was studying her face. Calm, unreadable, but intelligent. I could sense it. When she spoke, it was with an accent. Soft, but clear. And then I did something I'm not proud of. She greeted me in Spanish. Out of habit maybe, or because I looked like I could understand. I didn't, so I smirked and said, "If you're so smart, then translate it." She froze. Her expression didn't change, but I felt the air tighten between us. For a moment, she didn't say a word. Then calmly, she leaned closer and translated, not just what she said, but the entire menu, line by line, in English, in perfect French, and again, in fluent Mandarin. I was stunned. Everyone at the table next to me turned their heads. I just sat there, speechless, my ego shrinking by the second. She straightened up and said, "Some of us wait tables not because we have to, but because we're waiting for the right opportunity to walk away." And with that, she she walked off. Something shifted in me that day. I realized how much arrogance I'd let creep into my hunger. I had confused ambition with entitlement. That night, I looked her up. Alina Reyes. Turns out she had a master's degree in computational linguistics. Had moved from Spain to help her ailing father and was working double shifts to pay for his treatments. Suddenly my problems seemed small. I didn't know it then, but that encounter was going to change my life. And hers. Because when you recognize brilliance hiding in plain sight, you either walk past it or you build with it. I chose the latter. After that encounter with Alina, I couldn't shake her words from my mind. Some of us wait tables not because we have to, but because we're waiting for the right opportunity to walk away. I've heard thousands of business pitches, been in rooms where people try to sell themselves with buzzwords, fake confidence, and borrowed ideas, but nothing ever hit me as hard as the silent power in her presence that day. That week, I returned to the Rosette 3 more times, not to eat, to watch. She was fluent in 5 languages, calm under pressure, able to navigate high-strung customers, with a diplomacy I'd never seen. She wasn't a waitress, she was a leader without a title. And I? I was still building from scratch again. You see, after my first startup failed, I began developing a new platform, Neural Nest. The idea was ambitious, a multilingual AI platform to translate, analyze, and emotionally interpret global data in real time, bridging gaps in customer service, international negotiations, and crisis management. It was bold, it was technical, and it needed a linguistic mind with emotional intelligence. Alina was that mind. One afternoon I stayed after lunch and asked to speak with her. She hesitated at first, but sat across from me. "You ever thought of working in tech?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like someone who hasn't thought of something bigger?" Touché. I told her about Neural Nest. Her eyes didn't just light up, they locked in. For 30 minutes, we went back and forth about language, patterns, neural nets, and semantic memory models. I hadn't met anyone who could keep up with me without pretending to impress. She wasn't trying to prove she was smart, she just was. I offered her a role right there, lead linguistic architect. It was a fancy title I made up on the spot, but the role was real. I offered her a small equity share instead of a full salary. I expected hesitation. She accepted without blinking. Building Neural Nest was chaos. We didn't have funding. We worked out of a coffee shop by day and a shared co-working space by night. There were days we didn't sleep, days the servers crashed, days where I thought, maybe this one will die too. But Alina, she kept showing up, not just physically, but mentally, strategically, creatively. When I'd lose patience with bugs, she'd say, "The code is just like people, misunderstood until someone slows down to translate it right." She wasn't just a partner, she became the heart of the vision. Eventually, we caught our first break. A small logistics company in Europe was struggling with global customer support. Their customers were scattered across 7 countries. They needed real-time multilingual help, and we delivered a prototype. It worked. They paid us $40,000 up front. That was more than I'd seen in 2 years. We reinvested every penny. More clients followed. A health company, a shipping firm, an international school system. Each one came with new problems, and Alina solved them before I could finish panicking. Then, the moment came that changed everything. We were invited to demo Neural Nest at the Global Tech Convergence Summit in Singapore. I had never traveled abroad. Alina, despite her fluency in 5 languages, had never stepped foot on a tech stage. We were underdogs. On that stage, surrounded by giants from Silicon Valley, investors who didn't know our names, and skeptics who barely made eye contact, we delivered. I spoke about speed, scalability, security. Alina stepped in and demoed a live, real-time translation across Mandarin, Arabic, and Russian, using emotion detection to adjust tone on the fly. The room went silent. Then, standing ovation. The following week, we had 4 funding offers. We chose the one that gave us freedom, $2.5 million in seed funding with full control of direction. That night, we didn't go out to celebrate. We sat on the rooftop of our hotel, looking at the skyline, eating takeout, quietly letting it sink in. "Brandon," she said, "you almost missed me." I smiled. "You were never invisible, Alina. I just had to learn how to see." That was the night we officially became co-founders. If I had known how fame felt, I might have run the other way. After the Singapore summit, things changed fast, too fast. We weren't just a startup anymore. We were the next big thing. Forbes wanted interviews. TechCrunch wrote headlines calling us the AI voice of the global consumer. Investors who once ignored my emails were suddenly offering 10 times their original terms. It felt surreal. For the first time in my life, I had a corner office. Glass walls, city views, espresso, machine humming in the background. My name was etched on the entrance of Neural Nest's new headquarters in Manhattan. I had employees who looked to me for answers. I had board members who trusted my vision. And I had Alina, still grounded, still sharp, still walking into meetings. In flats instead of heels because, as she put it, comfort is power. But success isn't silent. It screams. And sometimes it screams in your face. The pressure hit quickly. Bugs in the system began to multiply. We expanded too fast. Clients demanded features we hadn't built yet. Our AI accidentally translated a political speech in a way that caused a minor diplomatic disaster in Eastern Europe. Twitter caught fire. And suddenly, the media who once worshipped us turned on us. Neural Nest, the genius startup that might be too smart for its own good. That headline stayed with me. I stopped sleeping. I micromanaged every team. I held meetings until midnight. My voice started shaking when I spoke in public, not out of fear, but out of sheer exhaustion. And worst of all, I started snapping at Alina. It was one argument, really, but it cracked everything. She questioned a risky partnership deal I was pushing. I didn't want to hear it. I accused her of not seeing the big picture. She stared at me like I had slapped her. "I helped build the picture," she said, voice steady. "But now you're painting over it with arrogance." And she walked out of that meeting room. I sat there alone, the CEO with all the answers, suddenly realizing I had none. For 3 days, we didn't speak. That's when I realized something terrifying. I had built this empire not just with code and strategy, but with people. And without trust, it was paper thin. On the 4th night, I sent her a message. "The company needs you. I need you. I forgot who we were building this for. Meet me where it started." She showed up at the Rosette. Same table. Same awkward tension. This time, I didn't talk about business. I told her everything. The fear, the pressure, the imposter syndrome I buried under tailored suits. She listened, just like always. Then she said something that shook me. "I never needed you to be perfect, Brandon. I needed you to stay human." That's when I knew Neural Nest wasn't about AI. It was about people, about connection. And I had almost lost the one person who understood that better than anyone. We went back to the office the next morning as partners again. We scaled slower after that, smarter. We hired emotionally intelligent engineers, not just brilliant ones. We brought in therapists for the team. We paused expansion and rebuilt our ethics framework from scratch. And the world noticed. Our comeback story was stronger than our launch. Not because of flashy features, but because of clarity. We signed 3 global contracts with telecom giants and 2 with education ministries. Neural Nest became the gold standard for emotionally aware translation across continents. And Alina? She became the face of our ethical AI initiative. It wasn't the ending. It was the evolution. I stood on stage in front of 8,000 people, the spotlight burning hot, but my voice steady. This wasn't a product launch. It was the Global Human Tech Forum, a summit where CEOs, scientists, and world leaders gathered to discuss the ethical future of artificial intelligence. And I, Brandon Cole, a kid from Brooklyn who once cleaned office floors, was the keynote speaker. But before I said a word, I looked to the side of the stage. She was there, Alina, nodding. Calm, powerful, radiant in a navy blue blazer with our neural nest logo subtly pinned to her lapel. Funny how things come full circle. But let me take you back to that moment, the one you saw in the title. The story everyone wants to hear. It happened 6 months ago. Neural Nest had just surpassed a $5 billion valuation. We were scouting a potential acquisition target, a translation startup in Madrid. As part of our due diligence, I flew in personally, along with Alina. We entered the boardroom, and to my surprise, the founder of the startup was late. So we waited, in a quiet, marble-walled space overlooking the city. A junior team member walked in to serve us espresso. She looked no older than 25. Polite, reserved, slightly nervous. She placed the cups down and greeted us in soft Spanish. Alina smiled and responded naturally. And then one of our own advisors, a newly hired hotshot from another firm, laughed and said, loud enough to sting, "If she's so smart, then translate it." The words rang out, bouncing off the walls like a ghost from my past. He didn't realize what he had done, but I did. I turned to the girl and said, in Spanish, "You don't need to prove anything, but if you want to, show him." Without flinching, she recited not just the Spanish phrase, but explained its historical root in Latin, followed by a poetic rendering in Italian, French, and even Japanese. Dead silence. The advisor's smirk vanished. Alina looked at me, and I could tell she knew. I was seeing another Alina in front of me, another hidden genius. Another star waiting to be seen, and this time, I didn't miss the moment. That night, I wrote a post on LinkedIn. Years ago, I mocked a waitress who turned out to be the smartest person I'd ever meet. Today, I saw another young woman challenged in the same way. But this time, I was the CEO. And I remembered what it means to see people, not positions. The post went viral, but I didn't write it for clout. I wrote it because I had come full circle. Back on the stage, as I concluded my speech, I said, "True intelligence isn't about degrees or vocabulary. It's about awareness. And if you want to build the future, start by recognizing the brilliance sitting quietly beside you." The crowd rose. Applause thundered. After the speech, I stepped down. Investors came, reporters gathered, but I walked straight toward Alina. "Thank you," I said. She smirked. "For what? The billion-dollar idea or the life lesson?" "For both," I smiled. "But mostly for reminding me that the waitress I once mocked wasn't waiting to be saved. She was waiting to be seen." Final reflections. I'm Brandon Cole, billionaire, CEO, but long before the headlines, the power suits, and the speaking gigs, I was a boy with borrowed shoes, dreaming of skyscrapers, and the woman who helped me climb wasn't in a boardroom when I found her. She was carrying a tray, speaking softly, and waiting for the world to notice. So the next time you see someone who seems ordinary, ask yourself, are they really unseen? Or are you just not looking hard enough? End of story.